Hey, what's up? What's up? How's everybody today? Good. Man, so good to get to be with you guys. It's an honor for me to get to spend some time with you this morning. And man, I just hope and trust that God is going to continue doing something in you. If He hasn't already started, that you're going to really feel like God is working. I'm believing God to do some awesome things in us today. I'm so excited about the series as we wrap up the series called Habits. And one of the reasons I'm so excited is because I'm hearing a lot of feedback from people and what God has done in them and what God has started in them. You know, I've heard from people who have struggled with smoking, who have put that down, and they're forming a new behavior system, a new way of walking out life. I've talked to some people who struggle with weight and trying to be healthy and exercise, and I'm getting to hear feedback about how those things are going. I've talked to some people who have struggled with alcohol and even alcoholism in different areas and things that are really taking some different approaches to life, and they're learning how to think differently and how to see differently. And so I'm so pumped, man, when I hear about God doing things in people, God beginning to really change our lives, because how many of you guys know that's actually the point? The point isn't just attending a church and staying the same. It's allowing God to do the work in our lives until we actually become different. And here's how we're doing it. Through this series, we've learned that while our life is a sum total of our choices, like every one of us and every one of you are who you are because of what you've decided that's brought you to this moment. But what we've learned is there was a 2006 study from Duke University, and what it taught us was that 40% of our daily decisions aren't conscious choices. They're actually just the result of our habits. And so if we are the sum total of our choices, the truth is that 40% of our daily choices are predetermined by existing habits in our life. The truth is we are the sum total of our habits. And so if we want a different life, we're going to have to look at the habits, the things that we consistently, repeatedly do, sometimes even without noticing. And as we begin to change our habits, we begin to change our life. As we begin to change our habits, we begin to change our future. And the truth is, if you missed any of the series, we've talked about how to start habits and how to end those things. We've talked about where you begin, where we begin is always about who we want to be, who we believe God has called us to be. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that today as we wrap up the series. If you missed any of this series, I encourage you, go to myhomechurch.tv and you can catch up on all of it. Today, as we wrap up, I want to talk about how we can actually keep the things that have started in us. How do we actually take these new behaviors we've started, or how do we take the behaviors that we quit and keep that going until they become the subconscious decision, they become a habit? And the truth is, this is something I've realized about myself. I don't have any problems starting something new. Like, I don't have any problem starting something new. In fact, I bet that any of you in this room would say, yeah, that's probably true. I can start anything, right? I can start anything for like a day. Right? No problem at all. I can do anything for a day or maybe even for some of you it's like a week, but once you get to that month or that 3 months or that 6 months, man, I can stop anything. I can stop anything for the moment, right? But if it gets past that moment, sometimes it gets really, really difficult. How do we keep these things that we've started going in our life? How many of you have started working out at the gym before only to watch that thing fall away? Any of you guys? Yeah, don't raise your hands to this, but how many of you are still paying for gym memberships you don't ever use, right? How many of you decided you were going to eat different, so you went to the grocery store and brought all new different groceries home? Any of you guys ever do that? You know what you did? If you did what I did, what you did is then you looked around the house a couple days later and realized there wasn't anything you wanted to eat, so you went back to the store and bought new groceries, and what you had is double stock groceries, and you just got rid of the stuff that you didn't want in the first place, right? We've got those Bible reading plans. Man, we're going to do it. We're going to do it. We're getting online, you know. So we sign up for 17 reading plans because we're going to do it, right? We go buy a brand new Bible because this is one we're actually even going to be able to understand. We read it for 2 days and then it sits there and collects dust, right? We're going to journal. So we buy a brand new journal. And then the next year we're going to journal, but we don't buy a brand new journal. We just pick up on page 2 of the journal we had from last year, right? We can start anything. We can start anything. Maybe for you, it's, in my life, it's like, man, I'm gonna be that parent who throughout the week, like I heard this story one time about this family who throughout the week, they didn't watch TV at all, right? It was like every night was devotions with their kids, and it was this intense Jesus time, and all of their kids were like, had 30-somethings on their ACT, and they were all reading, and it was awesome. And I'm like, man, we're gonna do that in our home. And then we get to day 2, and I'm like, you guys are annoying me. Turn something on TV. Y'all ask too many questions, right? Like, I don't know, maybe that's just me. You can start anything for a minute, but my kids are like, yeah, anyway. They're like, thanks, Dad. Yeah. Hey, how do we make this stuff stick? Well, let's talk for a little bit today about why I think our change in behaviors don't become habits, why they don't stick. I think one of the biggest reasons is honestly probably discouragement. We get discouraged. And I think one of the biggest reasons we get discouraged is that we try to start too many things. We try to stop too many things. Like we say, hey, you know what? I'm going to make all of these changes. I'm going to do all of these things differently. And here's the reality. When you're making changes in your behavior, how many of you realize it takes a lot of focus and intentionality to make big changes in your life? And when you're trying to change everything, it gets very discouraging because the truth is you're so busy like, man, I'm going to change this and this and this and this. And before you know it, there's not one thing in my day I look forward to anymore. I hate living, right? It gets discouraging. We're trying to change it all. We're trying to stop it all. And the truth is when we slip up in one moment, because it takes so much focus to create change, and we'll talk about that in a minute, that I lose focus for one moment, and before I know it, I've gone through an entire day that I've reverted back to my habits, because you have to remember, if you're not consciously thinking about it, you revert to your habits. And when I try to change too many things, it makes me changing anything impossible. It gets discouraging. I think one of the other big reasons that it gets discouraging is that we forget that things don't change overnight. See, one of the things that James Clear said in his book, and I thought this was so powerful, I hadn't thought about it this way, is he said we forget that our results are a lag measure of our habits. Our habits are in front of us, and our results follow behind. See, what we don't realize is that what you are experiencing today is the result of last year's habits. Whatever is going on in your life today isn't because of the habit that you started today. It's because of the habit that was started a year ago. And you're beginning to see the results. You're seeing the fruit. That's why so often when something happens in our life, we're like, man, we need to do something different. We need to make a change. But you still feel the negative effects of the life you've lived that keeps hitting you even after you've stopped living it. It comes behind you. The truth is that tomorrow we will begin to experience the results of yesterday's habits. But 6 months from now, we can begin to see the results of tomorrow's habits. Now, James Clear created this chart that I thought was awesome. It's called the Plateau of Latent Potential. And I don't know why he named it that. I would have called it the Why We Get Discouraged chart, but that's just me. He's a really smart guy, and so he says words like that. But here's what it actually is. Here's how it works in our lives. The blue line is what we think should happen. January 1, I go for a mile run-ish walk thing, right? January 2, I should be able to go on a 3-mile run-ish walk thing. January 3, I should be at 5 miles, shouldn't be tired, should come home, make breakfast, and be like, good morning, baby, how are you, right? But the reality is that's not the way it happens. I don't immediately begin to see results. In fact, January 1, I go for a run walk thing. January 2, I wake up angry, sore, and don't want to get out of bed. January 3, I definitely don't, because I went on another run walk thing January 2, and January 3, I can't hardly move. By January 5, I actually can do it without there being pain in my life and not kicking my dog when I come home instead. Right? There's a lag between when we start a new habit and when we begin to see results, and there's this valley of disappointment that happens between when we begin what we think should be happening and when we actually see the results. But if you notice, what actually happens is as the results begin to rise, there's a place and a time where it absolutely turns and it skyrockets upwards, and the results we see are better than we ever could have hoped for. But we have to stick with it. We have to fight through the disappointment. You don't immediately see the results. The results are a lag measure of the habits in your life. Listen to Galatians chapter 6, verse 7 through 9. It says this: don't be misled. You cannot mock the justice of God. You will always, everybody say always. You will always harvest what you plant. What you do, what you sow, what you put out there will always be a return on your harvest. But here's the thing. How many of us would plant a tomato plant, put the seed in, put some water on it, right? And expect in a week that it already has tomatoes that are ripe for me to eat? We don't expect that out of that seed. We know that it's going to take time for it to grow. But when it comes to us and our behaviors, we think Miracle-Gro is a real thing. Hey, Miracle-Gro doesn't work like that either, right? It takes time for it to produce in our lives. It takes time for us to see the fruit from the seeds that we began planting yesterday, a week ago, a month ago. It takes time for us to see a return and our life to begin to change. It goes on, it says, those who live only to satisfy their own sinful nature will harvest decay and death from that sinful nature, but those who live to please the Spirit will harvest everlasting life from the Spirit. Look at verse 9. So let's not get tired of doing what is good. At just the right time, we will reap a harvest of blessing. Look at this, if we don't give up. Hey, how many seeds have you put in the ground? How many things have you started only to not see the results that you wanted quick enough and go back with a shovel and undo all of the good things that you did? I think one of the biggest places we see this is in our relationships. Maybe there's tension or frustration in our relationships. Maybe you're married and there's an issue with picking up your shoes in the house. And you're like, you know what? I'm going to have a habit. I'm going to pick up my shoes and I'm going to put them in my closet. And my wife, every time I do it, is going to be like, you're the greatest husband in all the world. But what happens is you pick up your shoes and you put them in the closet and nothing is said. And you pick up your shoes and you put them in the closet and nothing is said. And you pick up your shoes and you put them in the closet and nothing is said. And you're like, I put my shoes in the closet and you didn't even know. And they're like, not only am I not going to say thank you, but you just undid all the days you put it in the closet without me saying it to you. Anybody ever got mad because you didn't say thank you fast enough? Didn't it undo all the stuff that they did? Right? That's what we do with the things in our life. We begin to get discouraged. Hey, it takes time. It takes time. Remember that bad habits bring instant gratification, but a life of regret. Good habits bring delayed gratification, but a life of fulfillment. There's a delayed gratification between you seeing the results for a new way of living that you've started, right? Number two, I think we get discouraged, but number two, I think it's hard to stay focused. Now, I touched on this and got a little ahead of myself, but I want to go back and finish this because it's really important. Listen to me. You are a creature of, which means you normally do something. If you want to do something other than your habit, it's going to take an intentional decision on your part. And if you're used to going through life or moments on autopilot, you will naturally revert back to the thing that was your habit, even when your habit is destructive. We lose focus. Listen, the time that you have to prepare for the new habit that you want in your life is not when you get into the moment. Hey, do you want to know when the worst possible time to decide whether or not you're going to wait till marriage to be intimate with another person is? When you're in the moment where you have to decide whether or not you're going to wait till marriage to be intimate with a person. Listen, you'll never make it. You'll never succeed. There are decisions that you have to make ahead of time to keep yourself out of situations. There's a focus that you have to have in your life if you're ever going to be successful at breaking the habits. Remember the statements we learned. After I blank, I do blank. Before I blank, I do blank. If your habit is something that you're going to do early in the morning, the time to try to prepare for it is not when you wake up early in the morning. It's getting everything ready the night before so that when you wake up, you've already intentionally put effort into doing it different. See, so often I think what we do is when we're trying to change habits, we produce all of this clutter. We get busy in our lives because we don't want to feel bad about what we're choosing. The way we keep from feeling bad is reminding of ourselves why we chose it. It isn't making ourselves so busy that we don't have time to think and prepare for what's coming. Hey, I know in about 15 minutes I'm going to have to make a decision with what I do with my kids because they're going to come home from school. And I'm not going to wait until they come home to school to decide what I'm going to do. They're going to do homework first. We're going to do some reading. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and get the books, set them on the table so that when they come home, we're already there. They're going to have a snack. I'm going to go ahead and get it out. I'm going to put it there because I'm going to be strategic about what happens. I know how I want my day to start, and so I'm going to lay out everything that needs to be started. The time to do it is not the moment you're in it. It's before you get to the moment. You have to stay focused. Why do we not keep our habits? Because we lose focus. We lose focus. I think the third reason is this. We don't actually change our environments. We don't actually change our environments. Remember what we learned last week. Motivation is overrated. Environment matters more. And we listened to a sermon that we're like, man, this is awesome. This is awesome. This is motivating. We listen to someone talk. We read a book and we're like, man, I want everything to be different. And we walk away so motivated. The problem is that we don't actually do anything with it. James chapter 1, verse 22 through 25 says, don't just listen to God's word. You must do what it says. Otherwise, you are only fooling yourself. For if you listen to the word and don't obey, it's like glancing at your face in a mirror. You see yourself, you walk away, and you forget what you look like. But if you look carefully into the perfect law that sets you free, and if you do what it says and don't forget what you heard, then God will bless you for doing it. So many of us were like, man, why can't I change these behaviors? Why can't I change my habits? We look in the mirror and we think, well, I don't like what I see. I know this needs to be different. This needs to be different. Okay, these are all the things that I'm going to have to change about my environment to actually make it different. But when we turn around and walk back to life, we go back as just like nothing ever happened, and then we come back to the mirror. Why aren't you different? Why aren't you changing? Because your environment is still the same. Whoever you are, your environment is perfectly created to help you be that. Listen to me. Whoever you are, that is exactly what your environment is acclimated to help you become. If you want to change who you are, you have to change your environment. And it isn't about listening to a message here or reading a book somewhere. It's about looking at yourself in the mirror, not forgetting what you saw, walking away and actually making changes to what you do. I got to change my environment. I got to change who's around me. I got to change what influences are putting in my life. I got to change what I'm listening to. I got to change what I'm thinking about. I have to change the cigarettes that I carry around with me if I want to smoke. I have to change the way I think. We have to change our environment. Hey, what needs to change about your environment in order for you to succeed? It's not enough to know it. You have to begin to do it. Right? I think another reason, and we're going to wrap up with this one of the biggest reasons that I don't think we often become and don't stick to our habits is this: it's our identity. And here's what I mean about our identity. When we look in the mirror, there's something that every one of us see. That's our identity. And often when we look in the mirror, what we see is not what we show everyone else. What we see is what we think is really there. And James Clear talks about different places that we make decisions out of. He says there are basically 3 different behavioral changes places in our life. The first is our actions. And if you think about it like an onion, the actions are the outer shell. And most of us, when we start thinking about the behaviors we want to be different, we think about the actions. But the truth is, if you start with the actions and the actions conflict with the identity, you won't actually make the change. Listen to this. We will always struggle to keep or break habits that are in conflict with what we believe about our own identity. See, the next layer of the onion is our processes or our systems. It's the way we do what we do. And he says that a lot of us, maybe we've gotten past the action. The action is that I hit snooze on the alarm, so I create a system that moves the clock, that does something so that it makes that harder, that I've got systems in my life to help cause me to do what I want to do. Listen, I've got a system in my place because the action is I eat these things that make me unhealthy, and so there's a system that regulates and helps monitor what I eat. But what happens when you look in the mirror and what you see back is someone who will never be healthy? What happens when you look in the mirror and you see someone that's always going to be a failure? What happens when you look in the mirror and you don't see someone who could ever be a godly man or a godly woman? How long does it take before the system that I put in place to read my Bible, because I'm going to make some changes about some outside things in my life, but when I look in the mirror, all I see is, man, who am I kidding myself, because I'll never be that anyway. How can I quit smoking when the reality is when I look in the mirror, I see a smoker? How can I quit drinking when I look in the mirror, all I see is an alcoholic? How can I quit looking at things that I shouldn't look at when I look in the mirror, I don't see someone who can serve God. I don't see someone that God even loves. The identity I see is this thing that could never be who I'm trying to be. We will always struggle to keep or break habits that are in conflict with what we believe about our own identity. See, that's why we can't try to change our habits from the outside in. Instead, we have to start with this question: who am I? Who is it I want to be? If you're a Jesus follower, listen to me. The question isn't even who you want to be. It's, God, who have you made me to be? Who have you created me to be? Who have you called me to be? There's a story in Scripture that I absolutely love about a man named Jacob. It's an Old Testament story that you can read about in Genesis chapter 31, 32, around that area. But Jacob was a man who grew up, and as he was growing up, he literally learned how to trick and deceive his entire life. In fact, he cheated his brother out of his birthright, and he cheated his brother out of his inheritance. And then he ran away from his brother because his brother was going to kill him, and he went to his uncle, and his uncle cheated him out of some things. And so you know what he did? He did what he always does. He turned around and began to try to cheat his uncle out of some things. And he gets to the place where all of this is coming to a head, and his brother's coming to see him, and he's fled from his uncle, and all of this has happened, and he finds himself in this moment where it's just Jacob. He's alone. And all of a sudden, Scripture says that he came and he began to wrestle with a man. It was an angel. And he begins to wrestle with this angel, and the angel says, look, let me go. He says, I'm not letting you go until you bless me. I'm not letting you go until you do something in my life. And there are some of you that are probably in that place. God, I don't know what's going on, but I know that I need you to do something, because I know that when I look in the mirror, I don't like what I see, and I want to change my habits, but I've tried to change, and I've tried to change, but I can't change. And when I look there, I hate who I see. So the angel says, let me go. He says, I won't let you go until you bless me. And he asks him this question in Genesis chapter 32, verse 28. He asks him, he says, what is your name? The man says, Jacob. And then the man says in verse 28, your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome. He says, listen, Jacob, whose name means trickster, deceiver, heal. Jacob, you've taken on the identity of your name. You cheat, you trick, you swindle, you deceive. You are Jacob. It's who you've always been. But listen to me. That's not who you are anymore. You are now Israel. Here's what Israel means. Israel means God fights. God fights. Hey, listen, this is who you've been your whole life, and this is who you've seen yourself as. And when you look in the mirror, this is what you see. But listen to me, that's not who you are. You need to know that when I look at you, I see something completely different. I see Israel, the one who I am fighting for, the one who I am standing here for, the one who I am looking to bless. But it's not about what I see. It's about what you see. This isn't you anymore. And after that, it says that Jacob said, please tell me your name. But he replied, why do you ask me my name? And he blessed him there. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, it is because I saw God face to face, and yet he spared my life. Hey, what is it you see? Because the truth is, the habits that are going to change, the habits that are going to stick, the habits that we're going to hold on to are the ones that start with who I believe I am. I didn't quit smoking. I don't smoke. I didn't just go on a diet. I am a healthy person. I didn't just stop looking at things online that I shouldn't. My eyes are holy. I am pure. I didn't just start picking up my shoes. I am the husband who God has called me to be. And as I walk through life, here's the question I ask. In the situation I'm in, what would a man of God do? I want to do this. I normally would have done that, but that's not who I am. I'm not Jacob. I am Israel. What would Israel do in this situation? When you're looking at the menu, what do I eat? Let me ask you a question. What would a healthy person choose to eat right now? They would choose to eat healthy. Now, here's what's amazing about this. Think about this. When God changed his name, it was instant. But when God changed his behavior, it took time. God instantly changed your identity. But it takes time to change your life, to change your habits, to change your thinking. Who are you? And I'm honest. I'm honest. What are the habits that an honest person would have? Start with one. Who are you? I'm someone who's going to love my spouse. What habits would a man who loved his wife have? Who are you? Who are you? I'm a servant of God. What habits would a servant of God carry in his life? Whatever situation you're in, what would someone who is Israel do in that situation? It's time for us to stop being Jacob and be who God has called us to be. If we do, listen to me, it's just a matter of time till you become who God said you are. He is faithful to work. He is faithful to move. He will never quit. He will never give up. He will never stop loving. He will never stop leading. He will never stop pulling. He will never stop pushing. He will never give up on you becoming who he called you to be. How do we change our habits? Figure out, God, who is it? Who is it that you want me to be? What would that person do Pick one. One thing to start, one thing to stop. Don't get discouraged. It takes time to see the results. And watch and see what God does with one of his sons and daughters who obediently chases who he says they are and who over time adds to their identity a little bit at a time. Amen. Amen.